Imagine opening your property tax bill next year and then realizing that it dropped by almost $1,000. For most Florida homeowners, that sounds like fantastic news. After all, over the last several years, we watched insurance premiums climb, home prices jump, HOA fees increase in many communities, and just about every part of owning a home has become a little bit more expensive. So when Florida starts talking about reducing property taxes, of course, people are going to pay attention. But before we celebrate, there's one simple question we have to ask. If homeowners pay less, who pays the difference? That's really what this entire debate comes down to. This fall, Florida voters may be looking at one of the biggest proposed changes to the state's property tax system in decades. And depending on who you listen to, this is either long overdue relief for homeowners who are tired of being squeezed, or it's a risky move that could affect local services, shift costs somewhere else, or possibly even make homes more expensive over time. So today, I'm not here to tell you how to vote. I'm here to walk you through what's actually being proposed, who could benefit, who may not benefit at all, and what this could mean if you own a home. And maybe you want to buy a home or invest in property, rent, or plan to move to Florida in the next few years. Now, if this is your first time on our channel, my name's Rovnak, and every day we get calls, texts, and emails from people all over the country looking for honest advice about buying and living here on the Florida Suncoast. So whether you're moving in 1 week or 1 year, my team and I am here to help you make smart real estate decisions. And that's exactly why I wanted to make this video, because this could affect your monthly payment, your home's value, your local services, and of course, one of the biggest investments that you might ever make. Let's start with what is actually being proposed, because there's already a lot of confusion floating out there online. Some people hear this and think Florida is eliminating all property taxes, and that is not what is being proposed. Others here assume it's just a tiny adjustment that won't matter very much, and that's not really accurate either. So in November, voters will decide whether to raise the homestead property tax exemption on non-school taxes to $150,000 in 2027 and $250,000 in 2028. And the measure also lowers caps on non-homesteaded property assessment, and those increases go down from 10% to 5% and limits future property taxes on core public services. This Florida amendment enacting is probably one of the most significant fiscal changes in the state's modern history, and it needs at least 60% voter approval in November. So in plain English, this is not a proposal to wipe out the entire property tax bill. It is a proposal to reduce a major part of the bill for homesteaded primary residences. And that distinction matters because a lot of people are reacting to headlines instead of looking at the actual math. School taxes will still be paid, and certain local taxes would potentially be reduced, but the biggest benefit would likely go to people who own and live in their Florida homes as their primary residence. Now, they say about 40% of all property tax revenue comes from homesteaded property taxes. Eliminate those taxes, and that's about 60% that remains. Now, let's stop talking in percentages and legal language, because this is where people's eyes start to glaze over. Let's use a real-world example. So imagine that you own a homesteaded home here in Sarasota valued around $600,000. And say that homeowner might pay roughly $6,450 per year in property taxes, or about $538 a month when it's included in the mortgage escrow. Now, this example might be a little bit high because my house is around the same value, and I purchased mine 20 years ago, and my taxes are a lot lower because it's been homesteaded for 20 years. Now, if this proposal eventually takes effect as currently written, that same homeowner could potentially save around $540 per year in the first phase. And once that larger exemption is fully implemented, that annual savings could grow to around $1,075 a year, or close to $90 per month. Now, let's be honest, most of us would like to save an extra $90 a month. Absolutely. Would an extra $1,000 a year help offset maybe your insurance or HOA fees, maintenance, whatever that might be, whatever those costs that are rising? Of course, it's going to work. And if you're retired, living on a fixed income, or you've owned your home for a long time and feel like every year brings another bill, gets bigger, that money really starts to matter. And this is why the idea has so much support. I mean, homeowners are tired of being squeezed, and I honestly understand that reaction. Over the past several years, I've watched buyers and homeowners try to balance higher insurance premiums and higher interest rates, higher home prices, and in many communities, even the HOA fees are higher. So for a lot of people, it feels like this total cost of owning a home in Florida keeps moving up, even when their income does not. So when someone says, we're going to lower your property taxes, people naturally pay attention, and that part is easy to understand. But here's where I think the conversation starts to change. Saving money is the easy part of the discussion. The much harder question is where that money comes from once it is no longer being collected, because property taxes do not simply just disappear into some giant government bank account. They help fun things that we use every day, often without thinking about them. The police department stuff, fire, rescue, road maintenance, public parks, libraries, drainage systems, all the infrastructure and the local services are all tied in some way to the local government funding. So let's take a quick drive through a typical Sarasota neighborhood. Every traffic light you stop at, every park you pass, every sheriff's deputy you see on the road, every fire station, every public library, every drainage canal that helps keep streets from flooding during the summer thunderstorms. And many of the roads that you drive on are funded, at least in part, by local tax revenue. Now, before anyone jumps into the comments, I'm not saying that government can't operate more efficiently. I'm not saying every dollar is spent perfectly. In fact, in a recent audit of Manatee County by the state, they said that they could do a lot better. And I'm simply saying that those services cost money and somebody has to pay for them. That's at the heart of this debate. Supporters say homeowners have been carrying too much of the burden and local governments need to tighten their belts the same way that families have had to do. And critics say the services funded by these taxes do not become cheaper just because homeowners pay less. Firefighters still need to respond. Roads still need to be maintained. Stormwater, it still matters, especially in Florida with all the flooding that we've had in the last 2 years because of neglected stormwater maintenance. Parks don't mow themselves. Libraries don't staff themselves. Infrastructure projects don't pay for themselves. So if property tax revenues drop, local governments have to make really tough choices. Here's the way I think about it. Imagine your household income dropped about 10% tomorrow. And you would just have three choices. You could spend less, you could get another source of income, or you could do a combination of both. And that's what local governments face, the same basic math. So if one of your largest revenue sources shrinks, something has to change. The debate's not whether the math exists, the debate is how those adjustments should be made. Now go back to, say, that $600,000 example. If the homeowner saves roughly $90 a month, that's real money. And most people would probably take that. But if over the next several years, your county increases sales taxes, adds more fees, raises assessments, or reduces your services, do you really come out ahead? Maybe yes, maybe no. That's what voters are weighing here. So the question is not whether lower taxes sound good. Of course they do. The question is what that total cost looks like after the dust settles. And that brings us to what I think might be one of the biggest unintended consequences of this entire proposal. What happens if owning a home in Florida suddenly becomes a little less expensive? Not dramatically less expensive, but maybe $50 a month, maybe $90 a month, maybe more, just depending on where you live and the value of your home. So what usually happens when the monthly cost of ownership goes down? More people start shopping. Every week I talk with buyers who are trying to figure out what the monthly payment they can sometimes afford. Some are off by $20, some are off by $100, some qualify for some home but not another. Maybe it's because of taxes, insurance, HOA fees, or CDD fees. That's the reality of today's market. Buyers do not just shop based on price, they shop based on the total monthly payment. So if Florida reduces one of these monthly expenses, even modestly, doesn't that make home owning a little bit more attractive? Now, does that mean home prices automatically go up? No, of course not. Real estate is not that simple. Home prices are affected by lots of different things. Interest rates, of course, inventory, migration, jobs, consumer confidence, insurance costs, plenty of factors. But one thing I've learned after years of helping buyers is that when you make ownership a little more affordable, you usually increase the number of people who want to own. So people across the country hear no state income tax and no local property tax, and suddenly more folks find their way here. And when more buyers compete for the same number of homes, prices have a tendency to rise. And that's one of the biggest unanswered questions. It's not just how much current homeowners could save, it's whether future buyers end up giving some of those savings right back through higher purchase prices. Think about the irony of that. A proposal designed to make homeownership more affordable could potentially increase demand and push prices higher in certain markets. That does not mean it will happen everywhere, of course, and it does not mean it's going to happen overnight, but it's absolutely kind of part of this domino effect that we need to think through. And that domino effect does not stop with primary homeowners. Remember, most of this discussion is focused on homestead property residences, but investment properties, vacation homes, rental properties, and commercial properties, they're not going to receive the same benefit. So imagine that you're an investor who owns several rental homes. If your taxes don't go down the same way that primary homeowners' taxes do, while at the same time local governments are also looking for replacement revenue, could investment properties eventually shoulder a larger part of that burden? Possibly. We don't know exactly what the lawmakers are going to do or how they're going to implement this, but it is one of the scenarios that people are discussing. And if owning rental property becomes more expensive, who usually pays? In many cases, at least some of that cost is going to find its way into rent. And that's why renters should be careful about assuming that this proposal might lower their housing costs. There's nothing that requires a landlord to lower rent because taxes change. Maybe some people would pass that savings along, but a lot of them are going to offset insurance, premiums, repairs, maintenance, all that management, or simply maybe keep it the same. So if you rent, you may be affected, not necessarily in the direct way, but in a different way. So this is why I don't think this should be framed as a simple pros and cons issue. It's more like a domino effect. If taxes are reduced, homeowners may save money. If homeowners save money, ownership becomes more attractive, demand may increase. If demand increases, prices may rise. If local governments collect less money, they may cut spending, raise fees, increase sales taxes, or shift costs elsewhere. It costs to shift to investors or businesses, and those costs may eventually show up in rents or prices. Every answer creates another question. We simply don't know how each piece of the puzzle will fit. And that is what makes this issue so important for real estate. Lower taxes sound great, making homeownership more affordable. And that all sounds great, but helping primary residents stay in their homes is probably the best idea. But every decision creates a ripple effect. Sometimes that ripple is exactly what you hope for, and sometimes it reaches places that you never expected. Now, there is one more part of this proposal that I think people moving to Florida need to understand. So the proposal includes residency rules designed to make sure that the expanded benefit goes primarily to people who are already in Florida. Under the current language, people who establish Florida residency before the qualifying deadline could receive the enhanced benefit sooner, while future residents who may move after that deadline may face a waiting period before qualifying for that larger exemption. Now, that may not sound like a big deal at first, but it could be significant. Imagine two neighbors buy similar homes on the same street. One has already established Florida residency and qualifies, and then the other moves here and has to wait several years before receiving the same benefit. Depending on home value and local tax rates, that difference could add up to thousands of dollars over time. So if you are thinking about moving to Florida, timing could become more important than many people realize. Now, before anyone panics, none of this is law today. This is still an ongoing process. It's going to appear on the ballot and it has to receive at least 60% of voter approval before it becomes part of the Florida Constitution. So even if voters approve it, lawmakers would still have to work through all the details of implementation, which includes procedures, residency, definitions, and how local governments can allocate that tax revenue that they receive. So let's separate what we know from what we don't know. We know many homesteaded Florida homeowners could potentially see property tax savings if this passes. We know school taxes are expected to remain the same, so your entire property tax bill is not disappearing. We know local governments depend heavily on property tax revenue just to fund these services. And we know there could be pressure to find replacement revenue through fees, sales taxes, assessments, spending cuts, or other options. What we don't know is exactly how this would all play out once the political process or promises become decisions. And that is where my advice as a realtor comes in. One question that I would not be surprised to hear from my buyers is, Rob, should we wait until after this vote before buying a home? My answer would be the same advice that I've given clients for years. I'd not base the biggest financial decision of your life on something that has not even happened yet. I've seen buyers wait because they thought interest rates were about to drop, only to watch prices rise while they just sat on the sidelines. And I've seen sellers wait for a better market, only to realize that the leverage that they had 6 months earlier is already gone. Real estate decisions should be based on the facts in front of you today, not the possibilities that you hope will happen tomorrow. If you're buying a home because it fits your family, the location works, and the payment is comfortable today, then any future property savings would be a bonus. That is icing on the cake. I don't think I would buy that cake because someone promised you the icing. If you needed this proposal to pass in order for the monthly payments to work, I would take a serious second look at those numbers and not do it. The same goes for homeowners. If this passes and you save money, that's great. Use it wisely. Put it towards insurance, maintenance, reserves, debt reduction, or just simply enjoy it. But it might give you a little more breathing room. But don't assume that lower property taxes automatically mean that the total cost of living will fall by the same amount. The money may shift, the services may change, the impact may be different just depending on where you live. So, would Florida homeowners be better off if property taxes are reduced? The honest answer is that some people probably would be, at least directly. Longtime homeowners, retirees, and primary residents could see some meaningful savings. But the broader answer is, what happens next? If local governments become more efficient and services remain strong, many people are going to view this as a win. But if costs are simply shifted into higher fees, sales taxes, assessments, or reduced services, the savings may not feel as significant as they thought. That is why I think voters should just look past the slogans and follow the dominoes. Do not just ask, will I save money? Ask what happens after I save money. Who pays for the services? What happens to home prices? What happens to renters, or what happens to investors? What happens to the people who move here later? And what happens in the community that I live in? Some people are going to care about what happens to other people. Some people won't. It's all going to be decided on the ballot in November. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because I think this is going to be one of the most interesting conversations that we have on Florida real estate this entire year. When this amendment appears on the ballot, would you vote yes, or would you vote no? Or are you just still waiting for more details before deciding? Does the potential savings outweigh the possible consequences, or do you think there might be better ways to make housing more affordable without changing the property tax system drastically? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I love to read them, and I'm going to read as many as I can, and I have the feeling that this is going to bring out some very strong opinions on both sides. And if you're thinking about buying, selling, or relocating anywhere here along Florida's Suncoast, my team and I would love the opportunity to help you. We work with buyers every day who are trying not just to understand the neighborhoods and floor plans, but the full cost of ownership, including taxes, insurance, HOA fees, and CDD fees, builder incentives, and decisions that can save or cost you real money. So whether you're moving next month or next year, reach out anytime. You can even schedule a free and very easy Zoom call right there on your screen, or it's in the description box below. We would love to help you make your move smooth and stress-free as possible. For living and buying in Sarasota, I'm Rob Rovnak. Bye for now.